This is the Fifth Estate Winning Headlines, your media police post. In this segment, we summarize some of the headlines that you may have missed this morning, but we also take a look at the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. Today is the 16th of February 2021, and I am 2J.
I am JM.
And I am Miss K. Again, in case you missed today's headlines, here they are. Daily Nation, Hustler Thunderbolt. The Standard, Haji, Peace Broker and Schemer. And finally, The Star, Uhuru and Ruto meet as police arrest DP allies. I'd like to begin by saying that Mohammed Yusuf Haji was a pillar in the community and an outstanding civil servant and leader. We at the Fifth Estate would like to offer our most sincere condolences to his family. However, today, as I looked at the headlines from the bill that imposes fines on anyone who propagates social status or class divisions to the political happenings at Simeon Nyachai's burial, I felt moved to ask a question. It's not a new question. In fact, we have asked this question before on the Fifth Estate. The question is this: of what use to Kenyans is our politics? And I know it's true. Aristotle taught us that man is a political animal. But how does our politics help us? In the last election period, we lost 1 trillion shillings and 3 years. Businesses stopped working at full efficiency a year before the election, the year of the election, and the year after the election, as we waited for the judiciary to make up its mind on who exactly won the election. And after the madness of 2017, Uhuru and Raila asked themselves this same question of what use to Kenyans is our politics. But unlike those ivory tower intellectuals I've been speaking about this week that spend their time pontificating, Uhuru and Raila have proposed a solution: BBI. And their reasoning is simple. Kenya has to catch up with the Asian tigers. I mean, we were in the same place in the 1960s.
Yes, correct.
So why did they leave us behind? I don't know. So, and I think it's our bad politics. So in Uhuru's thinking, if we fix our politics, the economy will fix itself.
Absolutely.
Let us get ourselves a matatu presidency. And because we can now accommodate more people, those who want to negotiate can do so, while the rest of us can put our heads down and industrialize. That way, we won't have to pause with fear every time an election is near.
Absolutely.
So true.
Couldn't agree more.
I think today I'm going to do something a bit strange. I'm going to make a case for William Ruto.
That is strange.
But then I'm going to tell you why I'm wrong.
Okay.
There is no doubt in my mind that the Deputy President of Kenya has the gift of adaptability. He has the ability to read and act on the signals of change. He made a hustler out of himself when a hustler he is not. He walked into the Gema stronghold when it was left unguarded, and he announced himself king in waiting. And then he chose to pick a fight with his boss that he is absolutely determined to win. In each of these instances, William Ruto forecasted a change that no one saw coming. Is it possible that William Ruto is telling us that succession elections are a game that one must prepare for? Luck is for the foolish, and survival is for the fittest. If so, William Ruto is a man of preparation. But this got me thinking about the art of survival that the Deputy President has cultivated. And with that, a fictional legal case came to my mind. It was one that was presented to me on the very first day of my undergraduate law degree. The trial is entitled The Case of the Spelunken Explorers. It is fictional because it was presented as a hypothetical and philosophical case of murder by necessity. The case involved 5 explorers who were trapped in a cave after a disastrous landslide. They found themselves unable to get out, and they had very little provisions to survive. Foreseeing that death was going to knock at their door, they devised a plan of survival: cannibalism. So they decided that by rolling the dice, they would determine who would be eaten and who would survive. Days later, when they were found and rescued, only 4 explorers were alive. Clearly, explorer number 5 had been eaten as a matter of life or death. And this case is curious because it presents 2 dilemmas. On one hand, these students did what they had to in order to survive.
Yep.
They anticipated their future and they adapted. They became what the moment required of them. But on the other hand, the law of the time clearly stated that whoever shall willfully take the life of another shall be punished by death. There was absolutely no exception here. And it is here that I foresee Kenyans will be faced with the very same dilemma. Survival of the fittest, or survival of something greater that binds us together as citizens. Unfortunately, I believe that WSR is willing to roll the dice with the fate of this nation. He will be accountable so that he can live.
Wow.
But the question we must consider seriously is, who will he eat to get to the top? And in the event that he indulges, will we as Kenyans sympathize with his act of survival or question the cost of that very survival?
Wow.
Dark thoughts there.
I
I'm
know,
not sure I'm willing to
sorry.
think about that Sri Lankan case.
Very profound case there for us to ponder
Very true.
upon over the next 17 months. Let me also take a jab at the deputy president. Now, Napoleon Bonaparte said, "Put a rogue in the limelight and he will act like an honest man." William Ruto, according to those who have worked with him, is a rogue who, when you put in the limelight, comes off as honest Abe, but he is far from it. So today I will tell you why William Ruto is not good for Kalenjins. And this is the perspective from BBI. As we speak, Baringo County is allocated 5 billion shillings every year. That is equivalent to 19% of the national revenue. It's its own share of the 19% raised nationally. And so what BBI promises, I'm sure you're aware, is that counties will now get 35% allocation of revenue. So under the new allocation, Baringo is now set to receive 10.3 billion shillings in the next financial year, double. Kericho gets 5.3 billion. Once BBI passes each year, they will be allocated 10.1 billion shillings. Again, twice more than what they're getting right now. Uasin Gishu County, where the deputy president will be retiring to in a few years, will be getting 13.2 billion shillings. And that is up from 6.3 billion shillings that they're getting right now.
Very impressive.
So why would you attempt to go against BBI? And so these are some of the benefits. Now, very quickly, let's talk about representation. Under BBI, Rift Valley stands to gain 12 new constituencies. 3 in Uasin Gishu, 1 in Bomet, 1 in Nandi, 1 in Kericho, 1 in West Pokot, and 5 in Nakuru. In spite of these gains, however, the deputy president is still rejecting BBI. Now, that is completely irrational. And here at the Fort Hall School of Government, we like to say that whenever you see a man behaving suboptimally, it is because he is nested in more than one game. So here is what William Ruto is playing at. William Ruto is saying no to BBI because he wants to perpetuate the culture of patronage politics. The culture that was introduced to us and perfected by his patron and mentor, Mzee Moi. Patronage politics is a practice of using state resources to provide jobs and services to your political clientele, those people that you control. So in sum, what he wants to do is to maximize discretionary power over the amount of money that could be sent to the counties. And to his benefit, the Kalenjin nation has for a very long time been conditioned into this culture of patronage politics. So unfortunately, for them, they have blindfolds around their eyes. But also, he thinks he's going to succeed, but without Gama, which you can never buy, you only rent, it ain't gonna go nowhere.
Not a very good day for the deputy president on this table,
No, it is not. And
Yeah.
we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the headlines for you. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is a headline topical or speculative, repetitive or groundbreaking, thoughtful or just plain lazy? I'm going to say I have nothing against the Standard, but I'll put it in the parking bay.
Respectfully, we put in the parking bay.
But between the Daily Nation, Hustler Thunderbolt, and the Star, Uhuru Ruto meet as police arrest DP allies. I'd throw the Star very
Throw the Star away.
far far away and leave us with the Daily Nation as our winning headline.
Most definitely.
Absolutely. Quite creative.
It really is creative.
Yeah.
Onto the political pieces that we call cartoons in this country. And just like the headlines, we have a 3-part criteria that we use to break down the cartoons for you. We ask ourselves 3 questions. Is it humorous or dry, satirical or pessimistic, and effective, or just plain lazy? Much as I like looking at all 3 cartoons, today we're going to skip right to our winning cartoon. I will be dictatorial about this. It is from the Star. There we have a caricature of our president and a caricature of our deputy president. It is the night after Valentine's and all did not go well. Seeing the red slip that's just hanging there neglected and the rose that is completely destroyed. And that's our winning cartoon.
Yeah.
Leave if you are fed up. Those are our last words to Dear Ruto. Now on to our final thought. But before we get there, please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Also turn on your notifications. That way you'll get an alert once we upload a new video.
And now our final thought. This week is inspired by Black History Month. And we kick off the week with the destruction of Black civilization. Great issues of a race between 4500 BC and 2000 AD, it's a very long time, by Chancellor Williams. So when we look at the world today, we would be forgiven for believing that Blacks have no history before the arrivals of whites or Muzungus. I think that's how we've been conditioned to see ourselves and our heritage. When we look at Africa, we see a continent that is way behind the rest of the world. In sub-Saharan Africa, so many of our archaeological artifacts and history was destroyed. And so in this book, it took Williams 16 years of research and field study to compile what he calls the destruction of Black civilization. The purpose was to serve as a reinterpretation of the history of the African race, to be a general rebellion against the messaging from white people who said, "You belong to a race of nobodies. You have no worthwhile history to point out with pride." So this book was written at a time when Black students in the US, Black students, educators and scholars were starting to piece together the connection between the way that their history was taught and the way that they were perceived by others and how they wanted to perceive themselves. And so they began to question these assumptions that were made about their history. And they took it upon themselves to create a new body of historical research. And so this book, he says, is premised on the question, if Blacks were among the very first builders of civilization and their land, Africa, the birthplace of civilization, what has happened to them that has left them since at the bottom of the world and society? And so this book seeks to answer some of those questions. And so we know from this book that much of Africa's archaeological record was destroyed by white invaders. And we know that Black civilization was interrupted by waves of invasions, interracial warfare, and slavery. And one of the first things that he looks at in the book is Egypt. And so it's normal today to believe that Egypt is an Arabic country. I mean, they even call themselves being part of North Africa, right? But Williams writes that the Blacks of Kemet, which he alleges was Egypt's proper name, built and led the greatest dynasties in history. And when white and Arab invaders swept into Kemet, Blacks of the Nile were pushed further south.
That's right.
And so he writes in the book, and I quote, "The Arabs were spreading out and penetrating formerly forbidden borders of Black states. They could therefore enter Black territory from which whites were barred. These Arabs confused African leaders everywhere, increased the tensions and tribal wars among them, and helped mightily in destroying the independence of African states." So time and time again, he says in the book, this same theme kept playing out. We were displaced by invaders, we resettle, we rebuild, and then we're once again displaced. So I think it's quite an interesting, although depressing, look into where we came from.
Absolutely, June. And I keep asking myself, Tujay, why is this our lot in life as Black people?
Right.
And we are at the center of the beginning of civilization. Africa was the center of the world. Egypt, as you've correctly pointed out, was also the center of the world. So I'll just trace our origins from this book as he describes it. And he says Egypt was the northeastern region of ancient Ethiopia. So number one, Egypt was actually part of Ethiopia. This was all part of Ethiopia, from where Ethiopia is today, all the way up to the top of the continent. And he says that there were 6 cataracts of the Nile, where the great watermarks in the heartland of the blacks, stemmed from. And the cataracts here are sort of like an invisible line, similar to like that one of the equator, along the River Nile. Those were key points in which you had really important African settlements, and those were the hubs of African culture, and that is from where they spread all over the world. And then he says this northern part of the Ethiopian Empire is what was the object of world attention from the earliest of times. It was, as I've said, the center of the crossroads from all directions, all the way from Asia and Europe. This was the nucleus. And then he also says that there was a heavy concentration of Africans in this Nile Delta. And from there, there was a huge agricultural system that developed. And that agricultural system had a way of attracting a lot of populations because it could sustain a huge number of people. And so Caucasians began to come into our continent. And then they started to undermine black power in some of the methods that you spelled out, 2J. And so whites got together with blacks, usually white men with black women. They made mulatto sons and daughters who were then systematically elevated in society. And they were, after they come out as mulatto, classified as white. And then they formed a social class.
Wow.
And that social class began to really segregate according now to race and skin color. And then from about 4000 BC, the agenda of dispossessing Africans now really begins. And so in the north, the indigenous population ended up being subdued. And he tells us there were about 3 choices that the indigenous population had at that time. They could remain, but if they remained, they'd have to be servants or slaves. If they were well-to-do, let's say they were architects and engineers, they became integrated in this Asian, Caucasian society, but then they were now classed as white people. The third thing they could do is reject integration into Asian culture and migrate southwards. So, they were beaten into submission, and they just had to basically leave their homeland and go further into the hinterlands of sub-Saharan Africa to find new settlements. The fourth, obviously, are the people who decided to resist. They fought, but they died. And he says, hence, why a good number of African tribes, and even here in Kenya, for example, trace their origin and claim Egypt as their ancestral land many thousands of years after this happened. Lastly, he equates that whole experience of Africans being driven downwards, similar to the divide that we have today in the north part of Sudan and the southern part of Sudan. And if you notice, North Sudan is comprised mainly of an Arab population, and he explains that very well. He says the reason it's like that is because these Arab people came in from Egypt, and then they, just kept pushing the South Sudanese people further and further down.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. He also mentions how these foreigners who had tried to integrate with the local women took control of the strategic ports all around Africa. And so in essence, what they did is, as they did in South Sudan, is you hem in the native population and they make themselves middlemen. If you want to trade, and trade is an important part of being any thriving nation, you have to go through these middlemen to access the greater world.
Yeah, terrible.
Absolutely.
I'd like to end with what he sets out as preconditions for progress. He says that there are about 5 things that any nation requires for them to progress, and those are the things that we do not have as Africans. The first thing he says is that we must become famine free. So he says that one of the things that disturbed Africans was that we were fighting nature. So a lot of our history goes back to saying that we came from Songhai, and Songhai is in West Africa, and if you know, that is the home of the Sahara Desert. So he says that we were fighting a lot of nature, and we tried to look for places that were better, highlands that we could get food, and if we could stop searching for food and water, then we could settle down. And once we'd found this next thing, which is a suitable territory, then we could proceed with negotiating with our neighbors to start a process of nation building.
Absolutely.
Then number 3, once we have these area that is suitable. We have negotiated with our neighbors to do some bit of nation building. We can then do the next thing, and he says this is a very crucial precondition. We can build a sense of community and nationality, and this has to be programmed into the people, a sense that they have loyalty to these set of people they've agreed to settle with, and that they're part of a brotherhood, and that our nation will develop, and this sense of brotherhood and nationality will then develop naturally. Then the next thing you need is, now we are a nation, we have a strong place that we can live that's good and suitable. We don't have to fight for food anymore. We can farm and thrive. We need an army to defend ourselves, which we didn't really quite have. And we also had rudimentary weapons, which he says. The Arabs had been given guns, they could blow us to bits, and we were using spears and arrows and water, hoping that we will not get hit by the bullets. The next thing he says is, once we have an army, we have a place, we have food, we need the reign of law and justice. And this has to apply equally to all sectors of the society. Now, we don't have these preconditions because of two things, and I quote. He says that we, as Africans, we generally lack planning ability, and we do not plan for the future. And he says that it is possible that this is our plan for the future could not be done because we were in a state of life and death, a continual struggle for mere survival. Black folk throughout this earth live in a hand-to-mouth existence, so that our planning tends to be from day to day and from hand to mouth. Because we didn't have a situation of internal peace and stability, we could not unshackle our minds to think. We did not have time to think. And I feel like this is a sad state of affairs.
It is. And you know why, Mrs. K? Is because we have plenty within our borders.
Yeah.
And if we do, then we're not in a position of having to innovate and really.
But JM asked a very interesting question. He said, why have we been given this lot in life? I want to ask another question. Why have we not gone crazy and attacked everybody else? I mean, why has there been no anger that has made us want to, I don't know, go to war and kill everyone else? But I don't know. Maybe
because in the end, we are a strong nation. And that's the thing that he shows us, that even when we were fighting nature, even when we were fighting invaders, we still kept our sense of identity, our sense of worth, our sense of humanity, and we are still here.
2J, maybe you can be our man of words. Oh, no. Actually,
our man of action.
Our man of action. Yeah. Chancellor Williams has been our man of words.
So I need to take it
Yeah, absolutely. Now you need to craft a few slogans.
Get violent.
And get people violent.
Get on the streets, but also have a plan.
Yes.
Today we had a winning headline from the Daily Nation. We put the standard in the parking lot of respect for the family of Haji, and we had a winning cartoon from the Star. I'd love to give you quotes that are lofty and about Black history, but I'll give you a quote that I don't know who said, but I do like it. Politics is the art of making your selfish desires seem like the national interest. Do have a great day.
Absolutely.